A racist security guard denies a black woman entry to a luxury car dealership and eventually gets physical with her. Later, he is shocked when she returns, and he gets karma. The afternoon sun gleamed off the polished glass doors of the luxury car dealership, casting a sharp reflection onto the sidewalk where Vanessa Thompson stood. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, she looked every part the successful lawyer she was. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she approached the entrance, her eyes fixed on the sleek sports car showcased just beyond the glass. She reached for the door handle, but before her fingers touched the cool metal, a voice stopped her. "We're closed, ma'am." Vanessa paused, turning to the source of the interruption. A tall man in a security uniform stood nearby, arms crossed over his chest. His face was blank, but his posture was rigid, as if bracing for an argument. The placard on his shirt read, "Daniel Reynolds." Vanessa offered a polite smile. "Closed? But the sign says you're open until 6. It's only 4. Daniel didn't budge, his expression remaining cold. "We're closed. You'll have to come back another time." Vanessa blinked, her confusion giving way to mild irritation. "It's the middle of the afternoon. Are you sure? I just wanted to take a look at the new models." "We're closed," Daniel repeated, slower this time, as if she hadn't understood the first time. His eyes flicked over her briefly, and Vanessa caught the briefest tightening of his jaw. "I see," she said, her tone measured. "Could I speak with the manager then? Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." "The manager's busy," Daniel shot back quickly. "And like I said, we're closed." Vanessa took a breath, steadying herself. She had dealt with this before. The quick glances, the subtle changes in tone, the way people suddenly became busy when she showed up in places where her presence was unexpected. But it didn't make it any easier. "I'll wait for the manager to be available," she said, her voice calm but firm. Daniel's stance shifted slightly, his arms uncrossing as he took a step forward. "You're not getting in, lady. We don't have time for this. There's a used car dealership down the road. Might be more your speed." Vanessa felt a tight knot form in her chest. She resisted the urge to react immediately, letting his words hang in the air for a moment. The quiet that followed was deafening, the tension between them thickening. "That's not what I'm here for," she said, her voice lowering, but still calm. "I'm interested in what you sell here. Luxury cars. Now, could you please get the manager?" Daniel's expression hardened. "We're closed for your kind," he muttered under his breath, but just loud enough for her to hear. There it was. The knot in Vanessa's chest tightened, but she kept her face neutral. She had learned long ago that reacting too quickly wouldn't help. Still, the words stung like they always did. "I see," she said again, quieter this time. "I'll leave, but I will be back." Without another word, Vanessa turned and walked back to her car, the heels of her shoes clicking sharply against the pavement. As she reached her vehicle and slid inside, she glanced once more at the dealership, her fingers gripping the steering wheel tighter than before. She sat for a moment, collecting herself. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but the audacity still managed to surprise her. And the anger, the simmering frustration, it never faded as quickly as she wished it would. In her rearview mirror, she watched as another customer approached the dealership, a white woman this time. Vanessa's eyes followed her as she strolled up to the door, not even hesitating as she pulled the handle. Daniel was there immediately, but this time, his posture was different. He opened the door for her with a smile, stepping aside as if she were royalty. Vanessa's heart pounded in her chest, the knot tightening until it felt almost unbearable. Vanessa's fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter as she sat in her car, watching the scene unfold in front of her. The white woman, dressed in a casual sundress, had been greeted with a welcoming smile, a stark contrast to the cold dismissal Vanessa had received just moments earlier. She blinked once, twice, willing herself to stay calm, but the anger was already rising, sharp and hot, like fire in her veins. It wasn't just the unfairness of it. It was the audacity, the blatant hypocrisy of it all. Without thinking, she pulled her door open and stepped out of the car, the smooth sound of the door closing behind her punctuating her determination. Her heels clicked against the pavement once more as she crossed the lot toward the dealership's entrance. Daniel was still standing by the door, his face now calm and friendly as he chatted with the white woman who had been granted entry without question. Vanessa's approach, however, wiped the smile from his face instantly. "Excuse me," Vanessa said, her voice cutting through the casual conversation he was having. "I thought the dealership was closed." The woman glanced between Vanessa and Daniel, her confusion evident, but she remained silent. Daniel's posture stiffened again, his friendly demeanor replaced with the cold hostility Vanessa had become all too familiar with. "It is," he said, his voice flat. But the lady here what? Vanessa interrupted, her voice sharp but steady. Is there a different set of rules for certain people? Because it seems like she didn't have any trouble getting inside. Daniel's lips tightened into a thin line. He cast a quick glance at the white woman, who was now watching the exchange, with a mixture of confusion and awkwardness. This has nothing to do with you, he muttered. It has everything to do with me, Vanessa shot back. I asked to see the manager. You refused. I asked why the dealership was closed when the sign says otherwise. You refused to answer. But this woman walks up, and suddenly the doors are open. The white woman shifted uncomfortably, glancing at her phone as if contemplating an escape. Vanessa ignored her, keeping her focus squarely on Daniel. Daniel, however, didn't back down. He took a step toward Vanessa, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She belongs here. You don't. The words hit Vanessa harder than she expected. She'd known, of course. From the moment Daniel had first stopped her, she'd sensed the reason, the unspoken rule he was enforcing. But hearing it said aloud made the sting that much worse. Vanessa took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. She couldn't let him win by reacting emotionally. I'm not leaving until I speak to the manager, she said firmly, keeping her voice even. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He glanced back at the dealership, then at Vanessa again. Fine, I'll go get him. But don't think for a second you're getting what you want. With that, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the building, leaving Vanessa standing alone by the door. The white woman lingered awkwardly, her eyes flickering between the entrance and Vanessa. Finally, she muttered an excuse and slipped inside, leaving Vanessa alone outside the glass doors. As she stood there, waiting, Vanessa's mind raced. The nerve of that man. The sheer arrogance. She'd experienced this type of discrimination before, at restaurants, hotels, even in the courtroom, but it never got easier. It always felt personal, like a slap to the face. She clenched her jaw, her frustration building. It wasn't just about her. It was about every black woman who'd ever been treated like this. Every person who had been told they didn't belong in places like this. The weight of it pressed down on her, but it only made her more determined. Minutes passed, and still no sign of the manager. Vanessa glanced at her watch. 5 minutes. 10. Her patience was wearing thin. She knew exactly what was happening. Daniel hadn't gone to get the manager. He'd gone inside to wait her out, hoping she'd give up and leave quietly. She wouldn't. Finally, the glass doors swung open again, and Daniel stepped back outside. Alone. There's no manager available, he said, his voice dripping with smugness. You're going to have to leave. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You didn't even try, did you? You just went inside, hoping I'd get tired and leave. Daniel took another step toward her, his expression darkening. Lady, if you don't leave right now, I'll have to remove you myself. Vanessa's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. You're going to physically remove me because I asked to see the manager? Daniel crossed his arms again, his posture towering over her. I'm not asking again. Get off the property, or I'll make you leave. The anger that had been simmering beneath Vanessa's calm exterior finally bubbled over. You have no right to touch me, she snapped, her voice rising. I have every right to be here just like anyone else, and I'm not leaving until I get what I asked for. But Daniel was already moving. He grabbed her arm roughly, yanking her away from the door, his grip firm and unyielding. Get your hands off me, Vanessa shouted, struggling against his hold. I warned you, Daniel growled as he dragged her toward the edge of the lot. You didn't listen. Vanessa wrenched her arm free, her heart pounding in her chest. She stumbled back but quickly regained her footing, glaring at him. Her mind raced. This was beyond anything she had expected. He was threatening to call the police. Vanessa knew she had no choice but to leave. This wasn't going to end with a conversation anymore. Not here, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Without another word, she turned and walked toward her car, every step heavy with anger, frustration, and determination. As she drove away, her thoughts were already on her next move. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Vanessa's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she parked her car outside her downtown office. The drive back had been silent, but her mind had been racing the entire time. Anger pulsed through her veins, and she couldn't shake the image of Daniel's smug face from her mind. She pulled out her phone and stared at it for a moment, then dialed a number she knew well. Mel, she said when the voice on the other end picked up. I need to meet. Urgently. Her colleague and close friend, Melanie Johnson, another attorney at the firm, was someone Vanessa trusted with her life. If anyone would understand the fire raging inside her right now, it was Mel. Within minutes, Vanessa was sitting in one of the firm's sleek conference rooms, a glass of water in front of her that she hadn't touched. Melanie walked in, concern written all over her face. What happened? She asked, pulling out a chair and sitting across from Vanessa. Vanessa wasted no time. She recounted every detail of the confrontation. Daniel's words, his treatment of her, the way he had physically removed her from the property. Each sentence poured out with restrained fury, her voice steady, but laced with the anger she had been trying to keep in check. Melanie listened intently, her face growing darker as the story unfolded. When Vanessa finished, there was a brief silence. Melanie leaned back in her chair, exhaling sharply. "That's absolutely unacceptable," she finally said. "And illegal." Vanessa nodded, feeling the weight of her frustration ease just slightly now that she had shared it, but it wasn't enough. "I don't want this swept under the rug, Mel. I want action." "You'll get it," Melanie replied, her tone firm. "We'll file a lawsuit. Discrimination, wrongful treatment, even assault, if we can prove he manhandled you." Vanessa clenched her fists, her knuckles turning white. "He did more than manhandle me. He humiliated me." Melanie's eyes softened. "I know. And we're going to make sure they pay for that." Vanessa took a deep breath, feeling the anger simmer beneath her calm exterior once more. "The worst part is that this isn't just about me. How many others have been treated this way? How many times have they gotten away with it because no one stood up?" "That's why you're standing up," Melanie said, her voice steady and encouraging. "You're not just doing this for yourself, Vanessa. You're doing it for every person who's ever been told they don't belong." Vanessa nodded, but the anger was still there, burning in her chest. "We'll need to gather as much evidence as possible. I want to expose everything. The dealership's practices, their hiring policies, everything. Already on it," Melanie replied. "We'll subpoena their records, request any internal communications, and see if there's a pattern of discrimination." Vanessa's mind was already racing through the legal steps. "We'll also need to file an injunction to prevent them from destroying any evidence." Melanie smiled. "You really want to go to war with them, don't you?" Vanessa's gaze was steely. "It's not war if it's justice." The two women spent the next hour outlining their strategy, mapping out every step of the legal battle that was about to unfold. Vanessa felt a sense of control returning. She was in her element now. Law was her battlefield, and she was ready to fight. But as they wrapped up their discussion, Vanessa couldn't shake the image of Daniel dragging her off the dealership lot, the physicality of it, the way he had treated her as though she were less than human. It wasn't something she would forget easily. "I want him fired," Vanessa said, her voice low but firm. "And I want the dealership to face the consequences. No more brushing this under the rug. They won't have a choice," Melanie assured her. "Once we're done with them, they'll be begging to settle." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her hands finally relaxing. But even as the legal plan solidified, her thoughts returned to the moment outside the dealership. The way Daniel had grabbed her, the way he had looked at her as though she didn't belong, that image wouldn't leave her. This wasn't just about winning a case. This was about making sure people like him couldn't treat others this way again. As Vanessa and Melanie finalized their strategy, Vanessa felt a sense of calm determination settle over her. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who had been told they didn't deserve to be somewhere. "Let's get started," Vanessa said, her voice resolute. Melanie nodded, gathering her notes. "I'll start drafting the paperwork today. We'll file the lawsuit by the end of the week." Vanessa stood, the fire in her chest now focused, controlled. This wasn't going to end the way Daniel expected. He might have dragged her off that lot, but she was going to drag him and the dealership into the courtroom. And this time, there would be no escape. Vanessa walked out of the firm's offices into the evening air, her steps more deliberate than before. As she made her way to her car, she allowed herself one last moment to reflect on what had happened. She had been wronged, blatantly, unjustly, but she wasn't a victim. She was a lawyer. And this was her fight now. Vanessa sat at her desk, her office window offering a view of the city skyline as dusk began to settle. The familiar hum of the office around her brought a sense of calm, but her mind was anything but quiet. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. The legal fight was just beginning, and she was ready to see it through. Melanie walked in, files in hand, a determined look on her face. "I've got everything we need to get started. We're filing tomorrow morning." Vanessa nodded, her eyes scanning the stack of documents. "Good. This needs to be airtight. No loopholes, no gaps for them to slip through." "They won't get through this unscathed," Melanie reassured her as she laid out the documents on Vanessa's desk. "Here's what we're including: discrimination, unlawful removal from the property, emotional distress, and battery." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Battery?" Melanie smiled knowingly. "That guard laid hands on you. That's battery. And it'll be more than enough to paint the dealership in a bad light." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her fingers lightly tapping the armrest. I want to make sure they can't brush this under the rug. If they try to settle quietly, I want them to know that won't be enough. This has to hurt. Melanie's expression grew serious. They'll try to cover their tracks. We need to be thorough. I've already started gathering evidence, video footage from nearby businesses, witness statements from anyone who was in the area. The more we can build this as a systemic problem within the dealership, the better our chances are of pushing them into a corner. Vanessa nodded, feeling her frustration transform into laser-focused determination. What about the dealership's internal policies? I want to see if there's been any history of racial discrimination, even if it's buried. Melanie placed another folder on the desk. I've already filed for an injunction. They won't be able to destroy any internal records. We'll be able to dig through their emails, hiring practices, even complaints from other customers, if they exist. Vanessa flipped through the pages of the documents in front of her. Each one detailed the charges they were preparing to file. But Vanessa's focus was on the strategy behind them. She wanted to make sure this case would expose more than just what happened to her. It needed to be bigger than that. We'll make sure this isn't just about me, Vanessa said quietly. I want this to be about every customer they've mistreated. Every person of color who's walked into that dealership and been turned away or treated like they didn't belong. Melanie nodded. We'll make this about more than just one incident. If there's a pattern of discrimination, we'll find it. Vanessa's mind raced as she considered all the possibilities. The lawsuit wasn't just about getting a settlement. It was about exposing the deep-rooted prejudice that had allowed people like Daniel to feel justified in their actions. And if she could show that this wasn't an isolated event, the dealership would be forced to take responsibility on a larger scale. This is going to be messy, Melanie warned, her tone serious. They'll fight back hard, and they'll try to paint you as difficult, as a troublemaker. You know how these cases go. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. Let them try. I'm ready. Melanie leaned forward, her eyes sharp. We'll have to be careful about how we approach this in the media. If we go public too soon, they'll spin the narrative. But if we wait too long, they might try to settle quietly before we can expose everything. Vanessa considered this for a moment. We'll keep it quiet for now. Let them think they can make this go away with a settlement. But when we're ready to go public, I want the whole story out there. The moment they offer a settlement, that's when we go on the offensive. Melanie grinned. That's the Vanessa I know. Make them come to us, then crush them when they try to wiggle out of it. Vanessa smirked. Exactly. For the next few hours, they continued to strategize, going over every possible angle. Vanessa's mind was clear and sharp, each step of the plan coming together in perfect order. She had always loved the precision of legal work, the way everything had to be lined up just right to build an unbreakable case. This was no different, but this time, it was personal. When Melanie finally left for the night, Vanessa stayed behind, staring at the stack of papers in front of her. It was strange how calm she felt now. The anger that had simmered so close to the surface earlier was still there, but it was now channeled into action. She picked up the folder labeled Daniel Reynolds and opened it. Inside were the initial findings from their investigation. So far, nothing too damaging. A basic background check, employment history, a few minor complaints that had been brushed aside. But Vanessa knew there was more. People like Daniel didn't operate in a vacuum. His arrogance, his sense of entitlement, it came from somewhere, and she would find out where. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair, her thoughts drifting back to the confrontation outside the dealership. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. Your kind doesn't belong here. He was wrong. She belonged anywhere she wanted to be. And soon, he and everyone else like him would know that. As Vanessa finally gathered her things and left the office, she allowed herself a small smile. This was only the beginning. The next morning, Vanessa and Melanie filed the lawsuit, officially setting the legal proceedings in motion. The dealership was about to face a battle they weren't prepared for, and Vanessa wasn't going to stop until they were held accountable. She had been denied entry once, but now she was breaking down the doors. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft golden glow over the city, as Vanessa approached the luxury car dealership once again. This time, there was no hesitation in her steps. She wasn't here as a customer. She was here to deliver a message. In her hand was a neatly bound stack of legal papers, an official notice of the lawsuit she had filed against the dealership. It had been just over a week since the incident with Daniel, and Vanessa had spent every moment since preparing for this day. Now, the moment had come. As she pulled into the parking lot, her eyes flickered to the familiar figure of Daniel Reynolds, standing at his post by the glass entrance. His stance was relaxed, almost casual, as he surveyed the lot. He hadn't seen her yet. Vanessa straightened her shoulders and took a deep breath. This wasn't about gloating or seeking petty revenge. This was about making a statement, one that they couldn't ignore. She stepped out of her car, papers in hand, and walked across the lot with deliberate purpose. The tapping of her heels on the pavement echoed in her ears, a sound that was almost comforting now. She was no longer the frustrated customer being denied entry. She was the lawyer about to turn the tables. Daniel finally noticed her as she drew closer, and the recognition flickered in his eyes. His expression hardened instantly, the same cold hostility creeping back into his features. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low, laced with annoyance. Vanessa didn't slow her pace. "I'm here to serve these," she said, holding up the stack of papers. "You might want to get the manager this time." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "We don't have time for your—" "I'm not here to argue with you, Daniel." Vanessa cut him off, her tone calm but firm. "I'm here on legal business. Either you can get the manager, or I'll serve these papers to you." For a moment, Daniel just stared at her, his jaw clenched in anger. He was clearly weighing his options, trying to decide how much power he still had in this situation. But Vanessa wasn't playing his game anymore. "I'll be right back," he muttered, disappearing into the dealership. Vanessa stood by the entrance, her heart beating steadily in her chest. She had prepared for this moment, yet there was still a small sense of satisfaction as she stood there, holding the papers that would shake this place to its core. Moments later, the glass doors slid open, and a man in a dark suit appeared. He was older, with graying hair, and a face that showed years of corporate experience. His name tag read John Mitchell, the manager she had been denied the chance to meet last time. He approached her with a cautious but polite smile. "Ms. Thompson, I understand there's been some miscommunication. I'm the manager here. How can I help you?" Vanessa's eyes met his, unwavering. "I'm not here to discuss miscommunication, Mr. Mitchell. I'm here to serve you papers." She handed him the stack of documents. "You and your dealership are being sued for racial discrimination, unlawful removal, and battery. These are the official papers." John's face froze for a moment as he accepted the papers, his eyes flicking down to the words printed neatly on the front page. His confident smile faltered. "This is unexpected," he said, trying to regain his composure. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. We can resolve this without going to court." Vanessa didn't flinch. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Mitchell. I was refused entry into this dealership because of my race, and then your employee physically removed me from the property. This lawsuit is the result of those actions. If you want to avoid court, you'll need to take responsibility." John's mouth opened as if he were about to argue, but he closed it just as quickly. He glanced over his shoulder, likely wondering if anyone inside could hear this conversation. The tension between them was palpable. "We'll need time to review this," he finally said, his tone more subdued. Vanessa gave a curt nod. "Take all the time you need. My legal team is prepared to go to trial if necessary." John exhaled, clearly realizing that this wasn't going to be brushed aside. "We'll be in touch." Without another word, Vanessa turned and walked back to her car, leaving the dealership manager standing there with the lawsuit papers in his hand. She didn't need to look back to know that the weight of those papers was already starting to settle on him. As she got into her car and drove away, Vanessa allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. This was just the beginning, but it was an important step. She had put the wheels of justice in motion, and now the dealership would have to face the consequences. They had denied her once, but they wouldn't deny her now. Back at the office, Vanessa sat down with Melanie to review the next steps. Serving the papers had been satisfying, but now the real work began. The dealership would likely try to settle quickly to avoid a public trial that could damage their reputation. But Vanessa wasn't interested in a quiet resolution. "We'll keep pushing," Vanessa said as she reviewed the legal strategy. "They'll come to us with an offer soon, but we need to keep building the case." Melanie nodded in agreement. "We'll need to make sure their settlement isn't just about money. They need to change how they operate." "Exactly," Vanessa replied. "This lawsuit isn't just about compensation. It's about accountability." With the lawsuit officially filed, the next phase of their plan was in motion. Vanessa knew this fight wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready for it. She had faced bigger challenges before, and this one was personal. The dealership had tried to shut her out, but now she was the one holding the power, and she wasn't letting go. The dealership's response came quicker than Vanessa had expected. Within days of serving the papers, whispers about the lawsuit began circulating in the media. It wasn't long before it reached the front pages of local news outlets. Headlines splashed with phrases like, "Luxury dealership faces racial discrimination lawsuit," and Lawyer takes on high-end auto dealer after alleged incident. Vanessa had anticipated the media attention, but now that it was here, the pressure was beginning to build. Sitting at her desk, she scrolled through a few of the articles, each with slightly different takes on the situation, but all of them centering on the same story. The dealership, once a symbol of exclusivity and prestige, was now being dragged into the public eye for all the wrong reasons. Her phone buzzed on the desk, and she picked it up to see Melanie's name flashing across the screen. "Hey," Vanessa answered. "They're panicking," Melanie said without preamble. "I just got a call from their lawyers. They're talking settlement already." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "That didn't take long. They know they're in trouble," Melanie continued. "The bad press is hitting them hard. The fact that it's a luxury dealership makes it worse. People expect them to be above this kind of thing, so the backlash is even stronger." Vanessa could hear the excitement in Melanie's voice. This was exactly what they had hoped for. By keeping the lawsuit quiet at first, they had allowed the dealership to fall into a false sense of security. But now that the story was out, the dealership was scrambling to protect its reputation. "They're offering a settlement," Melanie said. "But it's nothing impressive, just a basic payout to make the whole thing go away. No changes to their policies, no accountability. It's like they think they can throw money at this and it'll disappear." Vanessa's smile faded. "That's not good enough." "I know," Melanie agreed. "I told them we weren't interested in a settlement that didn't include some form of public accountability. They're not happy about that." Vanessa sighed, tapping her fingers lightly against the desk. "Of course they're not. They want to keep this as quiet as possible." "What's the next move?" Melanie asked. Vanessa was quiet for a moment, considering their options. The media attention had put pressure on the dealership, but if they accepted a weak settlement now, it would be as if nothing had ever happened. They needed to push harder. "We go public," Vanessa said finally. "I want to hold a press conference." Melanie sounded surprised. "Are you sure? I mean, we've already got the media on our side, but a press conference might make them even more desperate." "That's the point," Vanessa replied. "They need to understand that this isn't going away just because they're uncomfortable. They need to be held accountable, not just to me, but to every person they've treated this way." Melanie was silent for a moment. Then she spoke again, her voice firm. "All right, I'll set it up. We'll get the ball rolling. Make sure everything's lined up before we go to the press." Vanessa nodded to herself. This was the right move. She could feel it. "Thanks, Mel. Let's make sure they feel the pressure." The next day, Vanessa stood in front of a podium, a cluster of microphones and cameras aimed directly at her. She was no stranger to public speaking, but this time, the stakes felt higher. The press conference had been organized quickly, but there was already a crowd of reporters, all eager to hear her side of the story. She took a deep breath, calming the nerves that fluttered in her stomach. This wasn't about fame or attention. This was about justice. She had to remember that. As the cameras clicked and the reporters settled in, Vanessa began to speak, her voice steady and clear. "I stand here today as a representative of not only myself, but of every person who has ever faced discrimination, whether subtle or blatant, in places where they have every right to be." The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. "Several weeks ago, I was denied entry to a luxury car dealership. I was told that it was closed, despite the fact that it was open. I watched as a white customer was allowed entry while I was dismissed. And when I stood my ground, I was physically removed from the property." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the audience. The cameras continued to flash, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. "This lawsuit is not just about what happened to me. It's about holding businesses accountable for their actions. No one should be turned away because of their race. No one should be told they don't belong. This dealership, like many others, has operated under the assumption that people like me don't deserve access to the same spaces as others. That stops now." Her voice was firm, but not angry. She didn't need to shout to make her point. "I want to make it clear," she continued, "that this lawsuit is not simply about monetary compensation. It's about forcing change. It's about making sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. The dealership has the opportunity to do the right thing, to take responsibility, and to make real changes to their policies and practices. But if they refuse, I am more than ready to take this fight to court." Vanessa glanced at the reporters, many of them scribbling furiously in their notepads. She knew her words would be in headlines by the evening. "As a lawyer, I believe in justice, and justice will be served." With that, she stepped back from the podium, the press conference ending as abruptly as it had begun. Reporters immediately began shouting questions, but Vanessa didn't linger. She walked away, knowing that the message had been delivered. The ball was in the dealership's court now. Back at the office, Vanessa and Melanie debriefed over coffee. The press conference had gone well. Better than expected, even. The public reaction was swift, with social media lighting up with support for Vanessa and condemnation of the dealership. They're going to have a hard time brushing this under the rug now, Melanie said, scrolling through her phone. Public sentiment is on our side, Vanessa nodded. Good. That's exactly what we wanted. She took a sip of her coffee, feeling a sense of satisfaction settle over her. The dealership had tried to dismiss her once, but now they were facing a full-blown crisis, and she wasn't going to back down. They'll come back with a better offer soon, Melanie predicted. But we need to make sure it's more than just money. They need to change how they operate. Vanessa's eyes flickered with determination. And we'll make sure they do. A week after the press conference, the dealership's legal team reached out again. And this time, they were desperate. Vanessa could feel the shift as soon as Melanie stepped into her office, carrying a folder and looking particularly pleased with herself. They're scrambling, Melanie said with a smirk. They've made a new offer. Vanessa raised an eyebrow, motioning for Melanie to sit. Let me guess. They're offering more money and hoping it'll make the problem go away? Melanie handed over the folder. That, and they're throwing in some vague promises about reviewing their policies. Vanessa flipped through the pages, her eyes narrowing as she read. The financial offer was indeed larger, and there were mentions of potential policy reviews, but nothing concrete. And notably absent was any mention of accountability for Daniel Reynolds. They think this is going to be enough? Vanessa muttered, closing the folder. They haven't even addressed the real issue. I'm not interested in empty promises and more money. I want action. Melanie leaned back in her chair, her face serious. They're trying to sweep this under the rug, hoping you'll take the money and walk away. Vanessa looked up, her expression hardened with resolve. We're going to push them harder. I want a real commitment to change, and I want Daniel fired. He's not getting off scot-free. Melanie grinned. That's exactly what I thought. They're panicking because they know they can't fight us in court. But we need to make sure they know we won't settle for anything less than real accountability. Vanessa nodded, her mind made up. Schedule a meeting with their legal team, and make sure Daniel is there. I want to see him face the consequences of his actions. The meeting was held in a sleek conference room downtown, the walls lined with glass that offered a view of the city skyline. Vanessa and Melanie arrived early, their legal files neatly organized, their strategy fully in place. The dealership's legal team arrived shortly after, with John Mitchell, the dealership's manager, walking in first, followed by the familiar face of Daniel Reynolds, the security guard. Vanessa felt a surge of anger seeing him again, but she kept her face calm and composed. Daniel avoided her gaze, his posture stiff and defensive as he took a seat across from her. The lead attorney from the dealership began speaking. Ms. Thompson, we've reviewed your concerns, and we're prepared to offer a revised settlement. We're willing to increase the financial compensation significantly and conduct a review of our internal policies, including diversity training for all staff. Vanessa didn't respond immediately. She glanced at Melanie, who gave her a small nod. Then Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes locked on the attorney. That's a start, but it's not enough. I'm not just here for money. I'm here for accountability. The room fell silent for a moment. Vanessa's gaze flicked over to Daniel, whose face was flushed with discomfort. She turned back to the lead attorney. I want Daniel Reynolds fired, she said, her voice steady but firm. He physically removed me from the property, insulted me, and acted with blatant racial prejudice. He doesn't belong in a position of authority. John Mitchell shifted in his seat, his face tight. Ms. Thompson, we understand you're upset, but firing Daniel— I'm not upset, Mr. Mitchell, Vanessa interrupted, her tone calm but unyielding. I'm holding your dealership accountable for what happened. You allowed this man to represent your company, and he treated me as if I didn't belong. That's not acceptable. And if you think I'm going to settle for vague promises and a payout while he keeps his job, you're mistaken. Daniel's face reddened as he finally spoke up, his voice defensive. I was just doing my job. You were causing a scene, and I had to protect the dealership. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. I wasn't causing a scene, Daniel. I was standing up for my right to be treated like any other customer. You physically removed me because you thought I didn't belong there. And you made it clear that it was because of my race. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. But before he could respond, Vanessa continued, This isn't just about me. It's about the way you treat people who don't look like your typical clientele. And the fact that you think your actions were justified proves why you shouldn't be working there. The lead attorney cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. Ms. Thompson, we understand your concerns, and we're willing to negotiate on this matter. But firing Mr. Reynolds is a serious action, and we need to— No, Vanessa interrupted again. her voice steady. It's non-negotiable. If Daniel Reynolds isn't fired, we're going to court. And trust me, the publicity from that will be far worse than anything you're dealing with now. John Mitchell opened his mouth to protest, but the lead attorney quickly raised a hand to silence him. He turned to Vanessa, his face tense but composed. We'll discuss the matter internally and get back to you within the next 48 hours. Vanessa nodded. That's fine, but understand this. If Daniel is still employed by the time we reconvene, we'll be proceeding to trial. The room was quiet as both sides gathered their papers, the tension thick in the air. Daniel's face was flushed with anger, but he remained silent, likely realizing that his position was more precarious than he had thought. 2 days later, Vanessa received the call she had been waiting for. The dealership had agreed to her demands. Melanie relayed the news with barely concealed excitement. They're firing Daniel, and they've agreed to implement the diversity and anti-discrimination policies you wanted. It's all in writing. Vanessa felt a wave of relief and satisfaction wash over her. This was the outcome she had been fighting for. Not just a financial settlement, but real, tangible change. They're scared, Melanie continued. They know they can't win in court, and they want this to go away as quietly as possible. But we made sure they're going to make those changes. Vanessa smiled, leaning back in her chair. Good. That's all I wanted. They'll issue a public statement next week, Melanie added, admitting fault and outlining their new policies. It's not a perfect victory, but it's as close as we're going to get. Vanessa nodded, feeling the weight of the battle lift from her shoulders. It had been a long, exhausting fight, but in the end, they had won. Daniel was gone. The dealership was being forced to confront their practices, and Vanessa had ensured that future customers wouldn't have to go through what she had. As Vanessa hung up the phone, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. It wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. It was about setting a precedent, one that would make people think twice before treating someone as though they didn't belong. Justice had been served, and it was only the beginning. A week after the dealership's agreement to fire Daniel and implement the necessary changes, Vanessa stood in her office, staring out the window as she reviewed the final details of the settlement. The public statement from the dealership had gone live that morning, admitting fault and outlining their new anti-discrimination policies. And as expected, the media was buzzing with coverage. It was a rare admission from a large company, and Vanessa knew it was the result of their fear of public backlash. The story had spread far and wide after the press conference, and Vanessa's name had become associated with fighting for justice in a system that often silenced voices like hers. Vanessa, Melanie called from the doorway, breaking her thoughts. It's done. Vanessa turned to face her, a small smile forming on her lips. They issued the statement? Melanie nodded. They did, and they're already starting to roll out their diversity training programs. They even hired a new HR director to oversee the changes. It's all happening, Vanessa exhaled, feeling a sense of closure finally settle over her. The fight had been long and exhausting, but now, standing at the end of it, she could see the impact. This wasn't just about a personal victory. It was about creating real, lasting change. And Daniel? Vanessa asked, her voice even. Melanie's grin widened. Fired. He's gone. His termination was confirmed today. They're not broadcasting that part publicly, of course, but it's done. Vanessa nodded. She had expected as much. The dealership wanted to avoid any further negative publicity, and firing Daniel had been a quiet but necessary step. He had been the face of their discriminatory practices, and his removal was a symbolic, if not public, victory. Melanie walked over and handed Vanessa a newspaper with the headline, Luxury Dealership Settles Discrimination Lawsuit, Promises Reform. The article outlined the case and the dealership's agreement to implement diversity training and new anti-discrimination policies. Vanessa skimmed the article, feeling a deep sense of pride. We did it, Melanie said softly, as if reading Vanessa's thoughts. You did it. Vanessa placed the newspaper down on her desk, her smile growing. We did it, she corrected, giving Melanie a nod of appreciation. I couldn't have done this without you. Melanie shrugged, though her grin betrayed her pride. It was your fight. I was just here to back you up. Vanessa appreciated her modesty, but she knew that Melanie's dedication had been instrumental in bringing the case to its conclusion. Together, they had made sure the dealership couldn't simply buy their way out of the mess they had created. I'm heading over to the new dealership this afternoon, Vanessa said, grabbing her coat. Figured it's about time I treat myself. Melanie's eyes lit up. Oh? Buying that car after all? Vanessa grinned. Why not? I've earned it. Later that day, Vanessa arrived at another luxury car dealership, this one farther from the city center, but with a reputation for treating customers well, no matter who they were. As she stepped inside, the salesman greeted her with a warm smile, immediately offering to assist her. Unlike her experience at the previous dealership, there was no hesitation, no second-guessing her presence. Vanessa was treated like a valued customer from the moment she walked in, and the difference was palpable. After browsing the rows of sleek vehicles, Vanessa settled on a car, a stunning black sports sedan that practically gleamed under the showroom lights. The salesman walked her through the purchase with professionalism and respect, and for the first time in weeks, Vanessa felt a sense of pure joy. When she finally drove the car off the lot, the engine humming smoothly beneath her, Vanessa couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The dealership that had denied her was now facing the consequences of its actions, and Vanessa had made sure they wouldn't forget what they had done. As she drove past the original dealership on her way back into the city, Vanessa slowed for just a moment. The familiar building loomed in the distance, its glass windows reflecting the afternoon sun. There was no sign of Daniel, no hint of the conflict that had once taken place there. Vanessa allowed herself a small smile as she passed by. She didn't need to stop. She didn't need to confront anyone. Justice had already been served, and now she was moving forward. With a satisfied glance in her rearview mirror, Vanessa pressed down on the gas and drove on, leaving the dealership and its past mistakes behind. The road ahead was clear, and for the first time in a long while, Vanessa felt truly free. With Daniel fired, the dealership publicly held accountable, and new policies in place, Vanessa's fight had come to a close. She had won more than just a case. She had made a difference, and that, she knew, was the most important victory of all.